morning, good afternoon, good evening. I have said many times ever since the 2013 Constitution was adopted that it is weak and feeble. Mugabe dictated the 2013 Constitution. And the likes of Paul Mangwana, who was the ZANU-PF co-chair of the committee, the parliamentary committee that drafted that constitution, he boasted about it soon after the referendum, when ZANU-PF realized they managed to get the constitution approved by the nation. He boasted about it, that Mugabe dictated that constitution. That constitution is a dictator's creed. And we should not be surprised. By now, we should know that. Because that is the reason, exactly the reason why it has failed to deliver any rights, freedoms, and most particularly, free, fair, and credible elections. What is disappointing here is that the people were conned to approve that constitution because MDC leaders, all of them, rallied around it, claiming that it was a democratic constitution. The truth of the matter is, the MDC leaders were finding themselves in a situation where the GNU was drawing to an end, and they'd not implemented even one token democratic reform. They were desperate to grab onto something which they could say, yes, we've done this. Mugabe, of course, knew that. And so he presented them with a constitution that he knew was not a democratic constitution, but he knew that they would run with it. Indeed, at one point, Tsvangirai called the new constitution an MDC child. What a lie. Here is a video clip, Mugabe boasting about his role in that constitution-making process.
The good thing is this constitution is no longer changeable by the principles, including Mugabe.
Sometimes Parliament thinks that it is so sovereign that it should control the acts. The principles. Quit. Mozora. Na Mangwana wako. Mangama kufaira. Sometimes people fail to know where power has derived from.
Well, that did silence our friend Manzora. I repeat, Mugabe dictated the 2013 constitution. Paul Mangwana had admitted that as much himself. Of course, he admitted it when the referendum had gone through, when he knew we had gone beyond the point of no return. So what has followed thereafter was people trying desperately to make a dictator's creed deliver their fundamental rights. A dictator's creed to deliver a democratic and healthy and functioning democratic political system. Of course, that will never work. And this is the reason why we've been going round and round in circles. It is interesting that we have reached a point now where Mnangagwa wants to dilute even those few rights that the individuals had even further. The right to vote to elect the president was the probably only meaningful election vote that counted in Zimbabwe so far. Because at least the vote for the president was much more difficult to rig than the individual constituency or local council election. Because the constituency elections, all those constituencies that are predominantly in the rural areas, and we have seen how ZANU-PF has been trying to change the constituent borders to include even urban constituencies, to include rural sections. It's because the party can intimidate and coerce the rural voter. That is not so easy with the urban voter. In the urban areas, ZANU-PF has accepted that a rigging would be a lot more difficult. And we saw it in 2013, for instance, when we saw ZANU-PF busing in people to vote in Mount Pleasant. It's got to bus in a lot of people who are going to win in an urban constituency. And many of those people that it had passed in, they didn't even know. They could not name where in Mount Pleasant they came from. That's how difficult it is. But when you're talking of a national constituency, like in the presidential race, you cannot just rely on rural voters alone. You have to get some urban voters as well. And that's where it gets really tricky now. And amendment number 3 seeks to avoid that from now on. ZANU-PF is guaranteed to have the majority because it controls about 60% of the electorate in the rural areas. So it's guaranteed to win maybe 60% of the parliamentary seats. And then Parliament will elect the president. Much easier thing to do. But what I'm saying to you is that as much as retaining that power is important, what we really should be looking at, and what we should have been looking at during the GNU particularly, when we had the golden chance to do so, was to come up with a democratic constitution. And this is what MDC leaders failed to do. Here is Tendai Biti boasting about how he is determined to defend or to stop amendment number 3 going through.
That is to say, 2/3 in the National Assembly and 2/3 in the Senate. It must then go to a referendum, because it is a bill altering term limits in the country. The referendum is a simple process, Baba. The referendum simply asks whether you are saying yes or no. Because we are going to campaign and live in the mountains to get that no vote. There's a second problem. The Constitution then says, when you change this Constitution and you remove the term limits, it doesn't benefit the incumbent.
It benefits the next.
It benefits the next. But you can change that provision.
Same process.
Yeah, we call it the Abdoulaye Wade provision. Because President Abdoulaye Wade amended the Constitution for a third time, and Senegalese said, it can't benefit you. And he lost at that stage. And that's why President Sall came in. And as fat as Yazid, as you know, President Macky Sall also tried to change the Constitution to benefit him. Yet he came through a process of rejecting a third term agenda. Right. That's why you can't trust people. But anyway, to come back to the legal process. Another referendum is required now to change the constitutional provision that says you can't benefit. That's when you will see Trababala's true colors, because all along you'll be saying, I don't want Vandova Akuda. Now when he says, now the Akuda, the constitution has to go to a referendum for the second time. Baba, pakaipa. Tusangana makomo. Tusangana kwa Chendabwe. Tusangana ku Lotito. Tusangana ku Eskodini. Tusangana ku Binga. Tusangana ku Cholocho. He can't win those referendums. He cannot win those referendums.
Okay.
So to put it very crudely, the idea of a third term agenda is fraught with such legal landmines that you would have to be so ambitious, so insane, so drunk, or both to ever think that it can actually carry out and see the light of the day.
Well, the truth of the matter is, all those things would have applied if the Constitution itself, the 2013 Constitution, was not such a weak and feeble document. Right now, as we can see, what is being proposed before Parliament is extending the term, and they are rephrasing it in such a way that it's not considered to be extending its 5-year term limit. Ziambi the other day was arguing that in 2017, Parliament decided that the presidential elections will be held every 5 years instead of every 6 years, as had been proposed in the 1990 Constitution. That did not require a referendum, true enough. But also it must be realized there that change was reducing the presidential term, not increasing it. People are elected for a maximum period of 5 years. The nation could go into another fresh elections now before the 5 years is up. That's different from increasing your term in office. People elected you for a maximum period of 5 years. But again, I go back to this issue that we have got a very weak constitution. And we have got a dictatorship. And we know that ZANU-PF controls all the state institutions. There is not going to be a referendum. So what is Tendai Biti going to do? I suppose it's got to challenge that decision in a constitutional court. The same judiciary that said in 2017 that a military coup was justified, legal, and constitutional. I don't see the same judiciary failing to say extending the term limit from 5 years to 7 years is unconstitutional. But what worries me most here is the very fact that Tendai Biti and company are now saying they will climb all the mountains, cross all the valleys to stop amendment number 3 going through. And yet, for 5 years during the GNU, they didn't have to cross any mountain. They didn't have to cross any valleys. They failed to submit even one democratic reform proposal in 5 years. The whole point here is that this constitution, we really should have never accepted it in the first place. And now we are being conned by the same people who conned us to accept that constitution to defend the same weak and feeble constitution. We are too gullible. We are too naive. We are easily conned. That has been our problem as a nation. The fight here should be focusing on making sure that we have got a democratic constitution. We had the opportunity to have a democratic constitution during the GNU. It was wasted. Mugabe bribed Tsvangirai, Tendai Biti, and the rest of the MDC leadership with the E-Class Mercedes-Benz limos for all the deputy ministers, all the ministers, all the 2 deputy prime ministers, and Prime Minister Tsvangirai himself. The very generous salaries for all the elected MDC officials and allowances. For Tsvangirai, a US $4 million house. And most of us thought that was the limit of the bribe. The truth is actually more was given out. Only now it's beginning to come out that Tendai Biti, Nelson Chamisa, Morgan Tsvangirai himself, Wolfman Nuwe, they all got farms and other benefits. Here is one of the leaks telling us of some of the additional benefits the MDCT and MDC Nuwe leaders got.
Zvandandisingazive izvozvo zvekuti identity card
Sorry, that was the wrong clip.
Bhazi rikafira musango, munhu asina kwaari kuenda mubhazi mumu anofara kuti ndo patopumba pake nditori nevamwe vangu pana. Munhu anorwadziwa nekurara musango munhu ane kumba.
Taibadana kumba kwangu.
But amana kumba gumbezi rangu reria. Mana so. But munhu asina imba atete kurara musango. So opposition inomeka sure kuti vanhu vaya vawane minda. But may he so rest in peace Tsvangirai. Praise ravo vanga vainaro. Chamisa anaro.
Anoita Chamisa. Ane family.
Kana azoramba. Ndoenda newe.
Rikupi.
Ane farm.
Ribi.
I know madress munhu anetsa kuti focha but anaro chakudza off camera.
Okay.
Ane mine.
Ane
makaseo.
Yeah?
Yes. Biti. Ane prazi. Hauna kumboona here picture yaBiti achitenga mombe kuna Temba Mliswa. Dzekuisa kuprazi. One of the biggest beef producers in the Matabeleland region, the Washman Ngwe.
Okay.
Yes, ane prazi. Ana utenga beneficiary pa land reform. But what they did is to discourage their people from acquiring farms because vaiza kuti munhu akaona something chapiwa nehurumende achapikisa.
Are you for real, Mr. Gansha?
Nomubvunza Washman Ngwe kuti haasi kuita beef here, producer beef here paprasi. Tonyenda netsana upo chingono gore rere. Handiti kuti stand ya upo chingono standard ine painogumira. But vakatotaura nehurumende nemasabhuku ikaextendwa because aita good.
This is the reality in Zimbabwe. The opposition leaders whom the people raised so much to elect into positions of power and authority with a view of implementing the democratic reforms to end the canopy of dictatorship have been collaborating with the regime all along, particularly during the GNU. Ever since the GNU debacle, they have encouraged people to participate in flawed elections, knowing fully well that their elections are flawed. And participating will only perpetuate the canopy of dictatorship. This fight to stop this amendment is not the fight we should be involved in. Because we will only be defending a dictator's decree at the end of the day. When what we should be thinking about is changing it and have a democratic constitution for a change. And that we can only get if we fight to make sure that the reforms are implemented. If we cannot achieve that, we should be fighting to make sure that people do not participate in a flawed process to give canopy of legitimacy. That is the fight we should be involved in. Think about it. Thank you very much. Have a good evening.